I'm Adam Pah. I'm the principal investigator of the Integrated Justice Platform, and I'm a professor at the Andrew Young School of Policy Studies at Georgia State University.
And my name is Kat Albrecht. I'm the executive director of the Scales OKN, a court data nonprofit focused on making court records public and analyzable for everyone. And I'm also a professor at Truman State University and a team member on the IJP project.
The Integrated Justice Platform started really from this kernel of an idea. When we're talking about the criminal justice system, most of the times when people think about data, they think about the individual. But when we are talking about the data that may be publicly available, it may not be at the individual level. And so when we designed the alpha schema for our knowledge network, we wanted to make both the individual and the charge that they were brought up against the key central elements for aggregation, so that even if individual data isn't available, we can still look at the entire criminal justice system on charges, how charges pass from arrest to prosecution to incarceration. So we can at least understand what are the varying levels of how long does it take to go from arrest to prosecution for a certain type of charge, whether that's a drug charge or a violent crime charge. And again, right, what are the varying amounts of sentencing that goes along with that? This is an illustration of our alpha schematic. Importantly, what it does when we're looking at this from the perspective of the knowledge network is it collapses all this data in time, right? There is the charge at arrest that is connected to the charge at indictment, that's connected to the charge that an individual may be sentenced for. All of these charges we normalize and connect back to a charge category in the same way that for the actual person that is being charged, we disambiguate them and connect them across all of these data silos. This is what lets us actually do analysis across the entire criminal justice system and integrates these data silos. As we've worked with our champions and users, we've collected a lot of feedback. And also as we've integrated other data silos, like the civil court records that contain eviction proceedings, we've grown our knowledge graph schema to incorporate these additional data silos and filled in the gaps to facilitate easier querying. What that looks like when we zoom in is that we've dramatically expanded the schema and made it easier to access data elements like dates that are associated with each essentially stage or step in a data silo. So if you look at an arrest, you can see that all of these other attributes are hung directly off of the central arrest. Booking, right, when they actually are booked at a jail becomes more complex. We can now see the interplay between person, a charge, and the case that ultimately arises from this. And our expanded schema for an entity really does a good job, I think, in displaying how central the charge is and the person is as a part of our data approach, that they are really co-equal data elements so that we can ask and answer questions either that are aggregated at the level of an individual or at the level of a type of charge that's used in any state system. Of course, when we look at something as big as a case that results from this, the expanded schema really does show a vast amount of complexity. But the benefit is that all of this is easily accessed from our key entities of persons and charges to allow us to actually query and assess how long does it take to move from booking to court hearing, from court hearing to incarceration, from incarceration to reintegration into the community. To help facilitate this querying, we have used standard ontologies that are already in use outside of our project and the Proto-OKN in the federal government. One of those key ontologies is the NEAM ontology. The NEAM ontology is a very large effort that is under NIST, so for the National Institute for Standards of Technology. And there are a number of domains that it covers. One of the domains that's of particular use to us is the justice domain. So this has a large and broad ontology that attempts to cover most of what occurs in the criminal justice system and ontologize it. We use these name predicates preferentially. So from the name core, there's a number of predicates like address, case, contact that broadly apply both to our graph and other graphs that involve human people in the real world. But then there are a number of attributes from the justice data model, like cases, charges, citations, paroles, that all relate to essentially our subject domain. We use all of these throughout our graph, and they constitute essentially the largest category of predicates that get used by orders of magnitude. So our graph conforms to the NEAM ontology, and it will interoperate with any other project that also chooses to use this ontology. We use our own predicate namespace largely only for litigation events that aren't covered in any other existing ontology. We also focus on knowledge alignment with NIBRS, the National Incident-Based Reporting System. NIBRS is the de facto reporting system that local law enforcement agencies use to report data on crime to the FBI, which then collates it in a standard report. NIBRS contains categorizations that relate to types of charges. It has an ontology that captures what the relationship is between an offender and a victim, as well as ontologies that capture what are the types of drugs involved in various drug crimes. Now, individual states all have differing laws. That's why there is this ontology, and each of the local law enforcements have to standardize their own data to the NIBRS reporting system before they can report it to the FBI. So we've similarly developed an automated method to actually look at the text charge descriptions that are available in the data and to make a prediction about what the corresponding NIBRS category is for every single charge, whether it's in an arrest record, a court record, or an incarceration record. What this lets us do is actually to query against it. So we can easily use the NIBRS ontology to query and get the counts of different drug type cases that may emerge. And it also allows us to use any of the other attributes that are available in the knowledge graph and to ask and answer questions. So given the types of drugs that are involved, we can ask, what is the time from booking to first hearing for all of the cases with that drug type? You can see in the graph, it's usually relatively short, except for the two drug categories at the bottom where there's very few cases and thus the very wide error bars. In terms of how we construct our graph, we try to be as permissive as possible. So when we're talking about our extraction, transformation, and loading into the knowledge network, we can accommodate both structured data, which is what would typically come directly from a law enforcement agency, where we can take this structured data, whether that's directly from a database or an Excel file, and do attribute mapping between the data dump, and then we'll execute our NIBRS category predictions, and then do disambiguation across all of our data silos and redaction of personally identifying information before we then publish a resultant knowledge graph. We can also work directly with unstructured data that's publicly published. This is what you will typically see with court records. So we have the tooling available to do the downloading, to do text extraction and normalization from these unstructured records. And after that, go through all the same steps of attribute mapping to the knowledge graph schema, doing NIBRS ontology charge predictions, disambiguating individuals, and then redacting before publishing the resultant knowledge graph. In terms of data provenance and updating, with structured data, this really just requires either access to partner systems or partner generation of data extracts. So for local law enforcement agencies, they can take our tools and do this themselves, or they can make data extracts available and we can do it for them. For any publicly available data, anyone could do this using our code, or if they have to write new code to do the data downloading, right? But after that, all of our publicly available tools are able to be used, and you can run disambiguation and map to the IJP entities and attributes. In terms of how we envision users using the integrated justice platform, we're very agnostic. We believe in providing open data and open access. And a lot of that means just being as permissive as possible. So the integrated justice platform is available on Frink, which is the Proto-OKN graph data supplier. So anyone can go there now and construct a Sparkle query and get structured data outputs from it. When Spider releases their visualizer for public consumption, they'll be able to use that to ask questions in a natural language and get tables and graphs back. And users can also go directly to our own site at Scales-OKN and use our own data explorer to explore the data or download it in bulk. In terms of trying to understand where the interest is for our partners, there's a number of competency queries that we use that are related to issues that they have. And while some of these may not seem that complex, you have to take into account that normally these data silos aren't connected and cannot communicate to each other. So simple things like tracking the jail population on a daily basis, know who's moving in and out of it, who has court dates, who's having their case dismissed, actually requires quite a bit of an effort to track about what the actual number of people is on a day-to-day basis. Tracking the time from arrest to someone's hearing in a case, which is very much important to make sure that everyone is having their rights to a speedy trial respected, actually requires merging together the jail and court data sets. And even asking other questions that relate to broader policy questions around crime prevention, community reintegration, like how many released individuals experience eviction after their release. We can now ask and answer through the integrated justice platform and our efforts to normalize and connect these data silos across the entire criminal justice lifecycle. In future development, we're improving our tooling to apply these existing ontology standards to make it more robust and easier. We're also working on developing easier querying and improved information retrieval through graph RAG systems in our own data explorer. And we're working to expand the usage of the integrated justice platform schema across local jurisdictions in the United States.